All right, perfect. Let's go ahead and get started. We have a pretty packed schedule. So again, good morning and good afternoon to everybody. Thank you so much for joining today's webinar titled Leveraging OKRs to Build Resilient Organizations. Anyone paying attention to the recent economic uncertainty can attest to the importance of building resilient teams. And I'm fascinated to learn more about how OKRs play a role in accomplishing this. So to educate us today, we're joined by Fred Gattalaro and Anthony Botha from Adaptivate. Adaptivate consults with clients on building an end-to-end approach to the design, implementation, and assurance of their transformation programs, while also incorporating agility and innovation practices. So in short, there's no one better to provide us with insights on resilience than Fred and Anthony. So Fred leads the Dallas office and works directly with clients on implementing new operational models and has over 30 years of deep consulting experience. And Anthony has a decade of experience to add to that. Both have been directly involved in projects across energy, consumer products, financial services, supply chain, and technology industries. This conversation is also brought to you by Profit Go, a world-class strategy execution platform. So, anchored by the most powerful OKR management tool in the market, we intend on giving teams a complete picture of how your long-term vision aligns with your team's day-to-day tasks and how your achievement of goals aligns with the development of your employees. Sorry about that. So if you're curious about learning more about the tool and how it can support your OKR needs, my name is Abi. I'm on the enablement team of Profit. We'll definitely be reaching out to you at the end of this webinar, but you can also reach out to us either in the chat or following up, and we'd love to talk to you a little more about the tool. So without any further ado, I'll go ahead and hand this off to Fred and Anthony, who will take it from here.
Okay, thank you, Abby. Welcome, everybody, to Leveraging OKRs to Building Resilient Organizations. We're going to move quickly through the content. We want to provide lots of time for Q&A, and we have a few interactive polls that we want to do during the session today, get some feedback. So let me tell you what we're gonna talk about today. So we're going to talk about why organizations are focused on resiliency. We're going to talk about the building blocks of a resilient organization. We're going to talk about how business agility is one of those building blocks. We'll talk about the enablers of business agility. One of those enablers is something that we refer to as alignment on purpose. And we're going to talk about how OKRs support that enabler of alignment on purpose. Then we will get into a little bit about leading or best practices for OKRs. And lastly, we're going to introduce you to what we call a quarterly delivery cycle, or a QDC. The important thing to know about OKRs are not something that you set and forget. It's something that that should be constantly monitored progress, adjusted, adapted, to make sure that your objectives are still in line, and that's going to help you deliver on your your resiliency goals. Okay, next slide. So let's talk about why organizations are striving to be more resilient. Economic uncertainty, obviously, and we see that more than ever. Economic conditions are changing, fluctuating rapidly. Organizational stability and profitability are hard to predict. I mean, again, we see that more and more. The result is, organizations, they're stymied, right? We see that a lot. And Organizations don't know. They don't know, they because of the uncertainty, they don't know how they should be operating. Should we be more cautious? Should we not be more cautious? When is it going to change? A resilient organization is more capable of adjusting their strategies and operations to mitigate these economic related risks and ride out these economic storms. Technology changes. Technology is changing rapidly. We see that digital disruption is ever increasing. We've seen that a lot over the years. We see a lot of that now with everything, all the talk about AI. What does a resilient organization do? They adapt to and leverage technology changes in order to help them maintain their competitiveness and to stay relevant in their industry. Social and culture shifts. We've seen a lot of this in the past so many years, right? Changes in norms, right? Values, the diversity and inclusion matters. It's changing the workforce. It's changing the workforce demographics. It's changing the workforce expectations. It's changing our customers' expectations. Again, resilient organizations, they adapt to these changes. They remain connected to the customers and the employees so that they understand and it can make sure that they're adapting to it. Competition, new entrants, disruptive business models, competitive forces can rapidly affect your market position. Obviously, this has always been around, right? I think the difference is now, as we see it in this world, it's the rate of change is faster and the new entrants are even faster. Resilient organizations, they're better equipped to respond to these threats, right? Seize market opportunities. You need to move quick. Time to market is so important. It's always been. It's even more important, and to innovate to make sure that you stay ahead. Environmental changes, climate change, natural disasters, other environmental factors can drastically impact an organization's operations. We see that again, more and more organizations impacted by different things happening in the environment. Resilient organizations, they're better equipped to manage. They're making plans to manage, to mitigate risk. They have contingency plans in place, right? And also in order to contribute positively to sustainability. Okay, next slide. So, Anthony, I know you've done a lot of research on companies' views on the importance of business resilience and resiliency and the value. Can you share some of your findings?
Sure. Thanks, Fred. So I think it'll be great to start off on briefly defining what a resilient organization is. So resilient organizations respond to change, recover, and thrive. So in our context, change would typically relate to a threat, a challenge, or a disruption. In terms of the survey, a leading analytics firm conducted a survey in 2022. Approximately 2,500 senior executives across various geographies and industries were included in the study. And some of the key findings are as follows. So 97% of the executives believe that resilience is important to their organizations. However, less than half of those executives see their organizations as currently resilient. 2/3, or nearly 66%, of the executives have taken action, and they say that resilience is central to their organization's strategic progress, with digital, technology, finance, and operations identified as the key areas of resilience. The 2x and 3x statistics in the diagram highlight the outcomes of a resilient organization. So resilient organizations have nearly double the survival rate compared to low resilience firms, where low resilience firms typically have higher rates of either bankruptcy or acquisition. And then lastly, resilient organizations can demonstrate up to 3 times the annual revenue growth rate compared to low resilience firms.
Okay, thank you, Anthony. Well done. So let's talk about what some of the building blocks are of a resilient organization. Um, First thing, you need a culture that fosters recovery, learning, innovation. All right, in order to do that, you got to have a growth mindset, right? And if some of these terms are unfamiliar to people, just let us know and we'll answer the questions. You have to promote open communication. You got to encourage experimentation so that you can learn and you can adapt quickly, which comes back to celebrating learning in order to encourage that experimentation and that growth mindset. Okay. And you have to emphasize the importance of feedback, because feedback is obviously important to learning. It's important to having that growth mindset. So again, creating a culture that fosters that the recovery, learning, and innovation that you need to have build a resilient organization. Risk management exercises during strategic planning. You know, we participate in a lot of strategic planning exercises. Organizations, you know, would typically do their normal strategic planning, what they think the market opportunities. We see more and more organizations wanting to address resiliency specifically alongside their normal, what would normally be in a strategic plan for their normal, where they see themselves going from a business growth perspective. So the things that they typically will do is, and we will work with them on, is identifying the threats to the organization's existence, right, or continuity. We'll estimate the impact of that threat, because obviously we want to address the things that have the greatest impact and likelihood. We'll assess the organization's ability to respond to those threats and identify what we need to do, the initiatives, in order to address the gaps in the ability to respond to the threats. And then, just like the things that we would do to potentially, for example, the objectives that we might have to grow the business, we might also have objectives specifically around minimizing the risk of these threats. Okay, kind of a third building block would be an operating model that promotes business agility. Okay, so promoting incremental delivery, having a cadence that it allows you to adapt, ensuring that you have very clear objectives and measures of success, and that the teams are collaborating to ensure that all our objectives and all our initiatives are aligned to those priorities. Okay, adopting principles and practices of agile delivery. Okay, and leveraging tools to visualize and report on progress so that we all are on the same page and we're all collaborating. Okay. Next slide. So the way we talk about business agility, it begins with a strong alignment to goals. Okay. We've defined it at Adaptivate, an agile operating model, to show you, kind of to help people understand. And there's different models out there, but this is our model, and it works well in terms of helping organizations understand what really is encompassed in business agility. And the things that we talk about and the things that we help our clients realize is, first of all, alignment on purpose, making sure that we have a clear narrative on the organization, where we want to go. We have a strong alignment on objectives and key results, and that we're collaborative and how those get developed. Certainty, a second one, is certainty of team and funding. So teams, we want persistent teams. Teams learn to work more efficiently together when they're persistent. Okay. And funding based on teams, is an important part of having a kind of an agile operating model. Okay. The team should be autonomous. 3, autonomous. They should collaborate. They should be self-sufficient. If you have teams that can't operate unless they're talking to another team and another team and another team, it's very hard to get things done. It introduces a lot of inefficiency. So they should have, they should have the control that they need in order to function. Okay. 4, empowered people. So you could have a team that's autonomous, has all the right people on it, but they're not empowered to make decisions. So they need to be empowered to make decisions. And again, that will accelerate their delivery. Okay. And of course, teams have to have an understanding of their career paths, and they have to also set them up to continue to build their mastery. Okay. The next kind of enabler that we discuss is a transparent culture and embedded test and learn behaviors. So objectives and key results and a measurement system, okay, approach to measurement, okay, transparency of progress, everybody performing the plan, right? That we understand what our performance to plan is, and that it's an outcome-based culture, right? Again, aligned to where we need to take the organization. 6.1's a little bit harder to understand, but those of you who have been victimized by this will understand this one, okay? An architecture, both from the business and technology, that's that is able to be taken apart so that we can make improvements, okay? When you have an architecture that's so intertwined, whether the business rules or the technology, that you really can't change anything unless you involve many, many organizations or the entire organization, the entire different functional areas, et cetera, makes it very difficult to make improvements, very difficult to adapt, very difficult to create that resiliency that you want, okay? And then lastly, sustainable, agile, and lean practices, practices for, how we work, so that we are successfully delivering iteratively, okay? We have agile processes that are consistent across the teams, and that we have interaction models that people understand how to work together. Okay? Anthony?
So we would love to gather your feedback on the enablers that are most important to your organization. So in the next slide, we will ask you to rank the enablers from most important to least important. We understand that each organization is unique, so your rankings do not necessarily need to align with the order or the numbering of the enablers list. So to participate in the poll, feel free to use your mobile device to scan the QR code currently on the screen, or go to slido.com and enter OKRs as the event name. So we need to rank the enablers from most important to least important. Okay. So, Fred, I think we've got everyone's feedback.
Okay, good. Well, you can see that alignment on purpose is number one. Hopefully it's not because we highlighted that one in the last one, or because of the title of the presentation, right, or of the discussion. But it's interesting. I was just on a call this morning with a client and said, if you don't get that right, nothing else matters. Okay, so we would kind of tend to agree with that. So, but if you do get that right, then you do need the other things as well. Okay, great. Let's go to the next slide, Anthony. Okay, so now that we let's talk more about alignment on purpose and how OKRs help that. Okay, so OKRs, right? What do they do for us? They help clarify the objectives. Everybody in the organization, right? They need to know what the objectives are. People have to identify and agree on the actions that will achieve, right, those objectives. Okay, OKRs, right, and alignment on purpose. Okay, helps to focus everyone on the effort. Okay, all effort is directed to the most important business outcomes. There's a clear link between the work that we're doing and those objectives. People prioritize and remain focused on the OKRs. Okay, and again, assuming those are and have not changed, right, based on some of the things that we said influence a resilient organization, then that's the correct answer. That's what people should be doing. Right. We have transparency. It's available for everybody in the organization to see. Imagine an organization where everybody knows what's important to everybody else. I can't say that I've always worked in those companies, right? Okay. People can, and when you have that, we can actually help and support each other on achieving those objectives. Okay. And obviously, with OKRs comes the ability to collect data, because again, an important part of the OKRs, which we'll talk about, is that they're measurable. So therefore we can collect data. We can understand whether or not we've met those or meeting those key results, and whether or not we are delivering the impact to the organization that we expected to get. Okay, Anthony, I know you are our resident history buff, right? Okay, so why don't you help us help everybody understand how this methodology came about?
Sure, Fred. So OKRs are not new. They've been around for the past 70 years. And although they were not necessarily called OKRs by everyone, many of the management by objective principles defined by Peter Drucker in 1954 have been used by some of the world's most successful companies. Intel and Google are among the early adopters of OKRs, and many companies across multiple industries use OKRs today.
Okay, so let's talk more about specifically OKRs. So you think about the objectives and key results, right? What's the objective? The objective is what we want to achieve. Okay, that's our goal. Okay, the key result is how we're going to measure that progress against that objective. Okay, so the objective should be actionable. It should be ambitious. Should be inspirational. Right? Therefore, it should feel slightly uncomfortable. Okay. We'll talk about this later. You don't just set them once. We'll set them annually. We'll set them quarterly, right? Okay. Clarity makes the objective achievable. If we don't have clarity, the objective will not be achievable. And objectives and the key results specifically have to be SMART, just like it's been around forever. SMART goals, right? They have to be specific. They got to be measurable. They need to be assignable. They need to be realistic. And they need to be time bound or time related, right? And again, aspirational, okay? Leading to data driven kind of grading. We'll talk about it in the context of a quarter, okay? Next slide. So let's talk about some leading or best practices that help you effectively operationalize or utilize OKRs, okay? We've done many, many client engagements, and this is what we've found that have worked best with respect to OKRs. Strive to prioritize the top maybe 5 objectives. It can be 7, right? The point is to not make it a long list, right? That people just have a hard time remembering. One of my clients recently said, he wants his objectives to be so. It doesn't want to be so many that you can't remember them, that you got to go look at a piece of paper to do it. They should be easy easy enough to memorize. Okay. Objective setting. So do we define them bottom up or do we define them top down, right? We argue that they're best done top down and bottom up. Okay, there's a certain amount of influence. Obviously, it has to start at the top, goes down, but the bottom up from your the teams, right? So there is a kind of a meshing of the minds, right? And then we understand and we have agreement around what those OKRs are. Okay, they should be a stretch. They shouldn't be layups, right? Okay. Um, you know, we've learned through many engagements, probably, what's the number? Roughly 70%, right? Should be strong performance achievable, right? Okay. You can't have the teams believing that none of the OKRs would be achievable. Okay. They should cascade. So they start at the organization level, but they cascade down to the team level. So what do we mean by cascade? So an OKR can yield yet a more detailed OKR that's at the team level or below, or multiple OKRs in order to cascade down to a level of work that people would actually recognize it as the things that they have accountability and responsibility for. Okay. Collective goal setting, also related to the top down, bottom up, right? Shouldn't just be a individual defining what the OKRs, but it should be goal setting between the teams, right? And the different levels in the organization. OKRs are not an individual performance evaluation tool. If you did that, what do you get? And then you'd end up with people trying to define 100% of them as a layup, okay? And that's not obviously how you want your objectives or strategies of the organization to be, okay? We want metrics. We avoid metrics that will take a long, long time to change, or you won't be able to make them measurable, right? Your key results, okay? Objectives should be sequenced, okay? And, have a roadmap, okay? So it's not just having those 5 objectives or whatever, you end up with 7, 10 objectives, right? But understand which ones are the most important from top to bottom, rank ordered, so that which ones to focus more on, okay? Regular communication around continuous improvement, what's working, what's not working. Okay, what do we need to change? What do we need to do better? Okay. In the idea of continuous improvement is going to help us perfect the process. The thing we talk a lot about is that OKRs, when you do this for the first time, it's not going to be as good as when you do it for the second time and the third time. So expect that. You don't expect to be perfect, out of the box. The other thing is incremental delivery. Promote the effective implementation of OKRs. So again, like I said before, we don't set it and forget it. We don't create an OKR potentially. We can create one for the year, but we should have opportunities to measure our how well we're meeting it. Let's say quarter by quarter. And we're going to talk about that next. Okay. So that then we can come back to it again, measure what's working, measure what's not working, and just instead of just finding out at the end of the year, hey, this didn't work for these reasons, and we've lost the whole year. There's plenty of opportunities to gain feedback along the way. Okay. Next slide, Anthony.
So we would love to gather your feedback on the OKR practices that you have incorporated in your organization. So if the poll question from our previous session did not automatically update, feel free to use your mobile device to scan the QR code currently on the screen, or go to slider.com and enter OKRs as the event name. So which of the leading OKR practices have you effectively incorporated into your organization? We'd love to get your feedback.
This is a multi-select, right, Anthony?
Yes, it is.
Any more? I mean, we'd love to
I
get your
think
input on this one specifically.
Okay, we'll give everyone another 30 seconds. Okay, Fred, I think that is all the feedback.
Okay. All right. Well, let's talk about this a little bit. It's interesting, right? So good at prioritizing, not having too many. Oops, it looked like it changed, right? Somebody did one drop off, right? So prioritizing, not too many objectives. That's good, right? Collective goal setting. Okay, that's good too. That's great. Okay. So regular communication across the teams. Let me just throw some presumption around that, right? If we don't have regular communication across the teams, what happens, right? Okay, sometimes then the OKR gets created, set, and then we don't follow up on it, right? Are we actually, it kind of goes stale, it sits in a desk drawer, right? Is anybody actually really operating to that? Okay. Cascading OKRs through the organization. A lot of times, what we see when people don't do that, the OKRs are at a higher level, and people don't know in the teams below them what that means for them. What does it mean in terms of how they need to change their work or change the things that they're working on? Sequencing objectives to provide a roadmap. Without that, okay, if we have multiple OKRs, and I'm sure many people have seen this, sometimes the OKRs actually are in conflict with each other. They may trade off with each other, right? So if we don't understand kind of which ones maybe are the most important one, that can lead to some difficulties in prioritizing, defining stretch OKRs. Well, we like them, obviously. You want to make them such that, where they're aspirational. Okay. Incremental delivery, again, dropped off, right? But, to set an OKR, I want to talk about in the next slide. To set an OKR, a lot of organizations, and I've actually worked in these organizations, we'll set it for the year. We don't look at it until kind of the end of the year. Okay. Objective setting is 40% up, 60% down. I mean, it could be collective, but obviously we want it to be both top down and bottom up. Okay. All right. Again, we do not want them to be a performance evaluation tool. So if that's happening, that's probably could cause why they're not aspirational. Okay. So interesting. And avoiding metrics that none of the above is not a great answer, obviously, right? And avoiding metrics that take a long time to change, that's good if we're doing that. If we're not doing that, then obviously it makes it just harder to measure the success of our key results. Okay. Next slide, Anthony. Okay, so let's talk about this. So what we wanted to leave you with, right, was kind of the don't set it and forget it. Organizations, a lot of organizations will create OKRs or set them up for the year, and then that's it. So you'd only have box one there, right? Okay, that's your kind of your annual planning process. Okay, agreeing on your North Star, where you need to be, setting your strategic objectives. Okay, potentially creating an annual OKR, right? What we propose at Adaptive Data, what we work with our clients to do, is to define a quarterly delivery cycle. In the quarterly delivery cycle, what we want to do at the end of the quarter, let's review the OKR that we let's define those OKRs by quarter. Okay. At the end of the quarter, let's do a business review. What did we get accomplished? What didn't we accomplish? Are we on track? What was causing us to not get accomplished? What benefits did we realize? What lessons could we learn? And then let's potentially either reset our OKR or reset our objectives. Okay, it's an opportunity to do that. You can see how that helped you even with the addressing some resiliency things that came up. Okay. And then let's replan for the next quarter. Big room planning is a way to do that. Okay, prioritizing on your work, identifying risk dependencies, your milestones, establishing their work, addressing capacity, etc., making sure that we have the right plan for the next quarter. Okay, potentially refining and approving that, with all that need to be involved with that. And then you can still do your monthly or your 30-day reviews, right? Your KPIs, whatever you want to do to measure in between and still potentially adjust. But the point of this slide is to show you that, you really, and again, what we propose to our clients is to have that 90-day delivery cycle. I know the last organization I was at, I was the COO for the organization. We implemented this exact same process, and it worked very well. The first year we did OKRs, we set the OKRs up for a year. Okay. We never looked at them until Q4. Okay. We learned our lesson. Okay. So several years ago. And then the second year we went and we defined them like this quarterly and did those quarterly reviews. Suddenly they became much more meaningful to us. And they really drove the business. Okay. Next slide, Anthony. So let's spend just a minute on telling you who Adaptivate is, right? We were founded in 2017 by 3X Boston Consulting Group executives. The organization has grown through COVID to over 140 individuals, okay, with 10 different offices, okay? We provide strategy consulting, process consulting, agile consulting, transformation consulting, scaling your operating models, right? Accelerating, helping you to accelerate your business design, improving how you do delivery, aligning your strategy with work, and again, business agility. And obviously we do a lot of work with OKRs as well. Okay. Next slide. Okay. So we partner with Profit.co. We help clients become more resilient, right? And we would invite you, there's all our contact information. If you have any questions about Adaptivate or some of the things that we talked about, or just comments, feedback, I'd love to hear it. Okay. Or obviously, Abby, if you have any questions about Profit.co. Okay. Should we open it up to Q&A?
Yeah. So actually, Fred and Anthony, there are a few questions that came through the Q&A already. So let's go through a couple of them. The first one was a really interesting one for me as well. One of the leading enablers that you had mentioned to effectively operationalize OKRs was that OKRs are not a team or an individual performance evaluation tool. And so what Steve is curious about is, why it is that those are disconnected. How is it not a part of the performance evaluation?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because you're going to set an OKR, okay, and then OKR is going to cascade down to, let's say, the team. The team's going to have an objective, right? Okay. I think what we were talking more about, not an individual performance metric. Okay. It takes a team obviously to meet that objective. It's going to be hard to just say, hey, we're going to ignore the fact that you didn't meet the OKR, okay, and the evaluation of the team. Okay, the reality is that you will, and that you will be kind of held accountable to what the expectations were. But if down at the individual level, I think that's where we don't want to connect it. Ideally, you don't want to connect it to the individual person level, because it really is about the team. The other thing about it is the aspirational part about it, right? If you do that top down, bottom up, right, collaborating on it, on the OKR, and if you make it so that you will be evaluated on it, then be prepared for the battle that you're going to get, right? Because of the fact that people are going to want, your teams are going to want to set it up such that it's a layup and they know they can meet it, right? And doing something that you've already accomplished next year, right? Or next quarter, is that really what your goal is for the organization? It might be, okay? It might be. I gave an example recently where I worked in an organization where a product that we had was in the end of its life cycle, right? And we would love to just be where we were last quarter on it or last year on it, okay? So, but that's typically not where you want to go with that. Okay?
That's a great point, Fred. Yeah, just the nature of goal setting, they tend to be sandbagged if they're part of the evaluation. Yeah, I agree. So for anyone else who has questions, just note that in Zoom at the bottom there's a Q&A section, so you can go there and you can ask additional questions. So we got another one from somebody, and this is also fascinating because we have a lot of customers or a lot of clients that come to us with annual goals, and we provide the recommendation of that it being quarterly. So what they were wondering is how, if you do have already created annual goals, how do you convert them to quarterly? How do you prioritize? And if you could provide an example.
Yep. Yeah. So it kind of depends on the goal. Okay. So let's assume, I'm going to pick one at a very high level. Let's say that you wanted to grow revenue, 10% for the year. Okay. Well, that could also translate to growing revenue 10% for the quarter, each quarter, because that will potentially result in 10% for the year, although the math isn't exactly right? Because 10% on top of 10%, or it would be more, right? Okay. But you can see how that one might be persistent from quarter to quarter to quarter to quarter. Okay. But a lot of times then the goals may be a ramp, right? Okay. We want to be at 10% at the end of the year. Okay. Where do we want to be in Q1 versus Q2 versus Q3 versus Q4? And it may be a ramp up. So it would really kind of depend on the goal and where we think we want to be. The worst, again, from my experience, the worst thing you can do is just to find the annual goal and then hope you're going to get there. Okay. I've got plenty of examples, many years of working where we've done just that. Okay. And we had to learn our lesson. Okay. The best lessons learned usually are through mistakes, and we've made those mistakes before, not as a consultancy with Adaptive 8, but when I was in industry. Okay. So again, you take that OKR, you look at it and say, in order to meet my annual goal, what would I have to do in Q1? What would I have to do in Q2? What would I want to do in Q3? What would I do in Q4? And then you look at it at the end of Q1 and say, hey, what worked? What didn't work? Right? Did we meet it? Because now you're forced now to get your lessons learned, right? What's working, what's not working, what's an impediment, what's blocking you from meeting those goals, and adjusting that potentially for the next quarter. So you have a much greater opportunity that then you're going to meet that OKR for the year. Make sense?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you, Fred. There a related question that came up just now. What happens if you're not able to achieve a key result in a specific quarter? Can you keep extending it quarter after quarter? Is it just a matter of going in and just keep extending the timeline? What would you recommend there?
I think what you'd want to do is you'd want to look at it and say, why did I not meet that? why did I not meet that key result? What stopped us from meeting that key result? Why did we not do it? What prevented us from doing that? Right. Again, what blocked us from doing that? Because I don't know that the right answer then is to just extend it to the next quarter, because if we don't understand why we didn't meet it, okay, why would then, I'll just be a little provocative here, why would you, if you change nothing, why would you think you're going to get the same results in the next quarter? Okay, so it's really an assessment of what lessons have we learned, why didn't we do it, and then understand whether or not we're going to make it for next quarter. What do we need to change in order to make that objective next quarter? Now, maybe the objective changes for the key result changes for the next quarter. Okay. Maybe it stays the same. Okay. But at least now you understand, right? And the organization understands whether or not you think you're going to make it, right? Whether or not, we think we're going to make it, and we've made adjustments in order to better improve our likelihood that we will meet those key results in the next quarter. But I don't think just extending it, not meeting it and extending it is the right answer.
And Vijay, if you are a user of Profit Code, just know that there is a tool or a feature within the tool that allows you to do this reset. So even if you're not using Profit, if as Fred mentioned, if there's a structured process for reflecting at the end of the quarter, that's best case. And tools like Profit, they provide features most times to allow you to add some reflection notes and be able to recreate the OKR next quarter with some adjusted metrics. And that actually takes me to Francisco's question, which is, how do you deal with the complexity of adopting Profit Code or any software, I'm guessing? Is there some kind of graduality? And maybe that's a question I can answer. I would say that that's absolutely the case, Francisco. You want, and we've designed that with the intent that the tool scales with your team's use. So it's very flexible. You have the option of turning off a lot of features. And so I would sort of take advantage of that, right? We built a tool with a lot of features that's configurable so that it accommodates a very simple use case, but it kind of grows with you as you expand on your use. And if you reach out to our enablement team, we're more than happy to provide you with a roadmap of what you can turn off, what I'd recommend leaving on. So maybe, Anthony, if you wouldn't mind flashing my contact info on the screen again, just reach out to me and I'd love to get you connected with someone on our team to help you with that. Okay. So another question from Nihal was he was having a hard time explaining what attainable versus stretch goals are and the recommendations around that.
Yep. Often happens, right? That people don't quite have an understanding, right? And I wonder if it's an understanding or maybe it's denial, right? I'm teasing a little bit, right? Okay. Obviously, attainable goal is something that we know we can meet. Okay, we don't have to change anything. We know we can get there, right? A stretch goal is something that, we would have to change something in order to meet that goal. Maybe that's a way to think about it, right? Okay. Because we're not set up to meet that goal. We haven't achieved that goal in the past. Something would have to change in order for us to get that additional increment improvement in that goal. Okay. So maybe that's a way to think about it. I'd have to understand more specifically what the actual confusion was, but maybe that'll help a little bit.
Yeah, and now feel free to add any follow-up comments to that. I'd love to dig into that deeper. Just to note, Sheila, to your question, the OKRs that Fred was mentioning, the example before, I think he was mentioning that they were originally using annual OKRs and then had a hard time, right, with with
Correct.
tracking them in the early quarters?
Yeah, I mean, that was an organization that is the organization that one organization when we first adopted OKRs, for the year, we set our goals up for the year, right? Okay. And then, then last quarter of the year, we're like, where are we against our goals?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, it's a little too late at that point. This is try as we might, it was a little too hard at that point for us to adjust, right? Figure out why we weren't meeting them. And then at that point, make changes. So I think the quarterly, then when we moved to the quarterly process, obviously was much more productive. We looked at them every quarter, we adjusted, and we much improved our ability to meet our OKRs.
Perfect. Thank you, Fred. Another question that came up, wait 1 second here. Okay, yeah, it's just continuing on to Nihal's earlier question on attainable stretch goals. He mentioned that KRs are meant to be smart. So if the team says that it's not attainable, how can we have stretch goals?
So the teams are saying it's not attainable. If I understand the question right, they're saying it's not attainable. So you're keying on the word realistic, right? Okay. Well, just because something is realistic, it doesn't mean that it can't be a stretch. Okay. So again, if you understand, we can get better, we can do things differently, we can get better results. Okay. And we could still argue that that is a realistic goal. Okay. Just because the definition of R is realistic doesn't mean that it has to be a layup, something that we know we can accomplish without any change. Again, we may still have to change things, but we know that is a goal for us, right? It's stretch, and we know we can get there, right? Or we have I should say, a vision for what we would have to change in order to make that improvement, right? So if it was just something that was just way out there, right? Hey, let's say we're an organization, we say, yeah, I remember once I was working in an organization, and he said, we wanted to grow 100% the next year. I said, it's not possible. Okay. This was actually, I wasn't working. I was kind of advising the company. Right. And I said, it's not possible. Okay. You're not going to get there. Right. And I was talking to the CEO of the company. I said, I know the market. I know your customers. I know your products. Right. And you will not get there. There's no way, right? So don't make that, well, we'll make it a stretch goal. Well, you can't make that a stretch goal. If you put it that far out there, people are just going to laugh at it. They're not going to buy into it. They're not going to feel accountable. They're not even going to work towards it, right? You got to have something that you can still feel that it's reachable, right? With change, it's reachable, but not so far out there that you're just going to ignore it.
Yeah, and just to add on to what Fred said, I think when you're defining the goals, you should use SMART collectively and not really try to fit it into, one of the categories of SMART. So try and use SMART like holistically when defining your goals.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you, Anthony. Fred. I think we've got time for maybe one more question. And this one is, how do the review reflection questions vary on the monthly reviews and the quarterly reviews?
Yeah. A lot of times on a monthly basis, they're more centered around KPIs, right? Okay. Key performance indicators than they are really, every organization has KPIs, monthly KPIs, right? Whether they're related to volume, okay, or let's say they're related to SLAs, right? Okay, volume of business, right? Or let's say they're service level agreements, okay? So a lot of times people will measure that, okay, on a monthly basis, okay? On the quarterly basis, they'll focus on the OKRs and what are we doing to meet the whether or not we're meeting the OKRs, what stopped us from meeting the OKRs. But if you think about OKRs, this is a nuance. You think about OKRs, a piece of the OKR can sound very much and be very much like the KPI. Okay. So you think about that OKR. If you meet that OKR, what's the benefit of it? Well, it should change potentially a KPI. Okay. So you may see that you'll see kind of hopefully the results. You may not see them in that same quarter, right? Because you haven't done everything that you're planning on doing in that quarter, right? But you'll see it in the KPI. So usually the monthly ones are a little more focused on the KPIs, right? Which is kind of historical performance, right? And if you think about the OKR, it's more directional, okay? What we want to do in the future, okay? So again, don't know if that helps, but that's maybe a difference on kind of how the questions are focused. Now, that doesn't mean you can't look at things from an OKR perspective inside of the month, right? Especially if something's happening, something's changing, especially as we talked about all the factors that impact business resiliency, right? Okay, then obviously you have that opportunity to change that.
And just to follow up to that, if the OKR is like a KPI, then can we measure OKRs on a monthly basis? Maybe it would help to mark the distinction between OKRs and KPIs as well.
You could, but it might be too much, because if you want to do the process correctly, right, with the OKR, because again, the OKR is directional goal setting, right? You're saying where we want to be over what time. To do that monthly would be a lot, and to do it right in the process that we kind of define, top down, bottom up, if you did it monthly, you would probably, as soon as you got done, you'd be doing it again, right? Okay, it's probably too much. Okay, even some organizations will say quarterly is too much. Maybe let's do it every 3 times a year, every 4 months, right? We recommend quarterly out of the box, but but at the end of the day, we work with our customers to tailor anything that we recommend based on what we think would work for them. Okay. And again, anybody has any more questions, observations, feedback, comments, you want to just test, an idea or something you're struggling with, feel free to reach out to myself or Anthony, right? Or Abby, right? I think we'd all be more than happy to answer any questions or even just share some insights and perspectives, right? Well, what we've learned versus, maybe what you've learned.
Yeah, and with that, I'd just like to do one final thank you to Fred and Anthony for giving their time to this webinar. Thank you so much.